Apparently, folks can hear us, but the video is not up yet. Okay, we can start. All right, wonderful. Good morning, everybody. This is our first Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee in the virtual world. So I am glad that we have this technology, which has allowed us to work really hard, especially during the budget and in all the subsequent meetings. And now that we have started up with our committee meetings, we are going to begin with GO session. We have 2 items today. And so the first item is the resolution to approve the tax-supported fiscal plan summary for the FY26 Public Services Program. The person that staffs this item for us is Mr. Gene Smith, and I see that we do have Mr. Madalino, Director of O&B, and Mr. Coveyou as well, Mr. Mullen. I think I see Mr. Hagedorn there as well. And so, as you know, the charter does require that the executive submit by March 15th a recommended budget and a 6-year program for public services and fiscal policy for the council each year. The charter also requires that the council approve the 6-year programs for public services each year around the time of the budget approval. The council's approval of the fiscal plan in June confirms our actions in May, and each year the council acknowledges that the June fiscal plan is a snapshot in time because we know the fiscal situation will change during the fiscal year. So every year we say this, and it is true, but I think that this year in particular, this statement is absolutely true. We know that as the world began to face the unprecedented health crisis, and also the executive, of course, recommended the budget by March 15th, and therefore we decided very quickly as a council that we would approve a continuity of services budget for FY21. But of course, when we adopted this budget on May 19th, 2020, we did not revise any revenues due to the health crises. We were advised that the executive staff needed more time to determine the impact before updating the revenues. Of course, like everything related to COVID-19, the traditional processes in place don't always align perfectly with the context of our current crisis. And so we need to recognize that while the charter requires that the council adopt a fiscal plan that reflects our decisions and assumptions, when the budget was approved in May, we also recognize that the fiscal picture will change. So today we're going to have a conversation about where we are in the snapshot in time, but we also know that things are changing, and I think that we will need in July to come back and update this conversation. Already, I know that the executive has, determined that a savings plan is going to be needed, and there's some other things that we need to work on. So this conversation, we're having it because it's required, but we know that next month we have to be back and have a much more updated conversation regarding all of this. So let me turn to Mr. Smith, and for my colleagues, again, we'll just go through the process. If you text me, then I'll put you on the list and we'll go through questions, et cetera, that way. But let me turn it over to Mr. Smith, and then we'll engage in a conversation with our O&B and finance staff as well. Mr. Smith.
Sure. Thank you, Ms. Navarro. As you noted, the committee needs to make a recommendation for the council today on the fiscal 21 to 26 fiscal plan summary. The council will introduce this resolution tomorrow and act on it on June 23rd. And unfortunately, with the health crisis and the limited committee sessions, this recommendation will come a day before the introduction. And just noting that for the public record. So as you said, the county council will be approving a 6-year public service program or a fiscal plan summary based on its decisions and the assumptions it had on May 19th when it approved the budget. And we are still waiting to get an updated picture on the revenues. But as you also noted, the council took action to do a continuity of services approach for the expenditure side. So the council has made decisions to limit some of the resources towards the agencies in fiscal 21, which will certainly help the situation as we move forward in 21 and beyond. So As always, the fiscal plan kind of has three parts. It has the revenue section, which the only section that changed from the executive's recommended operating budget was the real property tax revenues, because the council made specific decisions to reduce those during the 21 operating budget. The rest of the revenues remained the same, except for an update to state aid like we do every year following the March budget. The second section is related to our fixed commitments, such as debt service, OPEB, PAYGO, and reserves. As noted in the packet, the reserves are at the 10% or above the 10% policy level for fiscal 21, recognizing some of the strength that the county has going into the health crisis and into 21. And then finally, the third section is the agency uses. The agency use continues to kind of to grow slowly, but a lot of that is going to be dependent on the revenue picture in 21 and beyond, and the other commitments and other expenditures that the council will need to face with the executive in 21 and beyond. So, as you said, this is a snapshot in time. The council typically gets an update in December, but I believe we'll be getting one sooner than that this year, and the council may could certainly choose to amend this resolution if they want to have a fiscal plan that more accurately reflects where the situation's at. Although normally, even in years where the fiscal plan summary changes throughout the year, the council just maintains the June fiscal plan that it's approved as kind of the point in time when the budget was approved. With that, council staff recommends approval of this fiscal plan for the committee and for the council, given the situation and understanding where the May budget was when it was approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, Mr. Medellino and then Mr. Cabillo, any additional thoughts? I think you're muted, Mr. Medellino. There you go.
My first thought is I have to remember to unmute myself when I get called upon. So thank you very much, Madam Chair, for giving us this opportunity. I think I don't have any disagreements with Mr. Smith. Mr. Cabillo and I have been talking about ways that both our two departments can work more collaboratively and frequently together, and also pulling in council and council staff to keep them updated. We are at the mercy of the state's calendar when it comes to when they give us disbursements. We received, and Mr. Covey, you can go into if he wants the May distribution, but even the May distribution reflected January to March, which for most of that period was quite normal. The state has changed its filing deadlines. As we all know, all of the filing deadlines were extended to July 15th. That included the estimated quarterly payment for usually higher income taxpayers that would have been due at the end of March, was pushed back to the middle of July. So we will be getting different revenues because of the crisis, but then on a different schedule because of the crisis. I wrote down a quick note as soon as you started, Madam Chair, that our calendar and the crisis are not aligned, and that is very, very much the case with our transition from fiscal year 20 to 21, how we reconcile. So I would just say to you all, to your colleagues, to the public, to give us some patience as we try to answer questions, and not just today, but during the whole year, and recognizing that we don't always have the information because the state is our tax collector for more or less half of our revenues, and we just have to go with whatever information they provide us. And as you know, that we don't get a good picture about our income tax until November, because that's when they will reconcile the tax returns from calendar year 2019. So we will be rolling with this crisis and the aftermath of it well after, in fact, maybe the crisis is over because of the way Maryland's unique revenue structure is constructed.
Definitely. No, I really appreciate that. I think that, as you said, we're very unique, but there's no doubt that other jurisdictions are dealing with the same sort of dance of how to align the pandemic schedule with the fiscal issues and revenue pictures and things like that. So we're all trying to navigate this together. Mr. Cabillo.
Yes, good morning.
Morning.
Okay, so all that being said, I think all I'd add at this point is we've been working on the revenue estimates all along, and what we're trying not to do is provide the revenue estimates of the day or week. As we entered into last week, as we began last week, economic thought was tending to coalesce towards a view that the recovery might be a shorter recovery period than a week or two earlier than that, and what we've been thinking for the last couple months. And then the Federal Reserve Chairman spoke on Wednesday, and the market went down almost 1,900 points. The Dow Jones average went down 1,900 points almost on Thursday on information that Dr. Powell provided about employment mostly. So we're, as Rich noted, and as you've already mentioned, we're in a spot now where it's really difficult to figure out what is grounded at this point. But from the very beginning, we've said that, the May and June income tax distributions are going to be very telling. And so our June distribution, hopefully we'll get detail early next week. The money comes in usually the 28th of the month, but hopefully we'll have some information about it next week. May was off a bit, not as much as necessarily we had expected it to be. And so June is going to tell us a lot more because it's going to have two bad months of withholding in it. And by the time we hit mid-July, when we're planning on coming and talking to you with full revenue estimates again, we should have hopefully a much clearer picture, and hopefully there'll be a sort of consensus around Maryland, if not the country or the world, about where we're going at this point.
Thank you. Okay, let's see, Councilmember Friedson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to all the work that has gone in. I am happy that the executive branch is moving forward with a fiscal plan and, a savings plan and starting that work. I think it's important that we get ahead of this as much as we can. I think this fiscal plan is in keeping with what we've been doing throughout the budget cycle, which is to go through what the current conditions are as best as we can, but noting the fact that we're going to have to be coming back to it very quickly and very soon. And I think as the chair noted, coming back in July in very short order to reassess basically everything that's in this fiscal plan will be necessary, but we do have legally required deadlines that we have to follow and can only go with the information that we are provided. I'm glad that the note of the OPEB conversation that we're going to continue. Continue to be disappointed that because of the COVID crisis, we were a little sidetracked in that conversation, but I think that's a really important conversation for us to be having, and so I just wanted to highlight that. It is in the packet, but I wanted to highlight it here. Obviously, that's been a major topic of conversation that this committee has been having for as long as I've been on it. In those questions, I think it's going to be taking added importance as we look at savings plans and what the appropriateness and the fiscal sustainability of major decisions related to OPEB are going to be, and that is related to the policy and the expectations. And I think we really need to have a similar policy conversation about reserves. This committee in particular, my colleagues on this committee, long before I got here, and the prior council made major decisions in this fiscal plan and the long-term fiscal policy related to the reserves. I think that's put us in a very strong position relative to many other jurisdictions, but there have been a lot of conversations of what the reserves are for and what the intention of the reserves are vis-a-vis the county's fiscal sustainability and of the expectations of the rating agencies. And I do think that as we head into these conversations, today isn't the right day, but I did want to put a marker and make a friendly request. Since the chair has been one of the leading advocates for getting us to the reserve, I hope that it is taken in kind. But I really do think that is an important conversation of whether the reserves are to fund ongoing operating expenses to fill gaps in that regard, or to fund new programs, permanently, not just to front the money and then get reimbursed by federal dollars as we have done up to this point, or whether they are to sustain significant revenue losses potentially, which had always been my understanding of it. And I do think that we need to have that conversation, because a lot of comments and discussions have been made publicly on that front. And I just lastly wanted to note, I appreciate the deliberative nature with which the executive branch has gone about this work, and look forward for that continuing. I appreciate the comments about being collaborative. We've talked in this committee about a more collaborative approach to revenue estimates. But I do think it's important also, as the chair noted, about other jurisdictions. There are other jurisdictions that have already moved forward with revenue write-downs. I believe Prince George's wrote down $134 million that included income taxes. Baltimore City did that very early on. We don't have to discuss that today, but I did just want to note that there are other jurisdictions that are moving forward with that, and I am hopeful that we move forward as quickly as we can, because the longer we wait on making these decisions, the harder these decisions are going to be, the more deep and more difficult the cuts that are going to be necessary are going to become. So I just wanted to note that, and appreciate the conversation, understand where we are and that we're going to approve this, but we need to make sure that it's very clear to residents, just like we did during the budget, that we're coming back to this very quickly, and all of these decision points, that the same holds true in this particular plan. Thanks.
Thank you. Council President Katz.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for being here today. I associate myself with both of my colleagues on the Government Operations Committee statements. I think, though, that we need, as we have said through the entire budget process, I think that we need to be moving as quickly as we can, and we need to get information as quickly as we can. In a lot of cases, a budget is always a guess. It's a pretty good guess sometimes. Sometimes it's not some years it's not as good as others, but it's a guess. And in this case, we have no idea from experience whether our guess is going to be correct or not. So we need to get information as quickly as we can. I agree that once we get it, we need to pivot as quickly as we can. But I also think that the discussion that Councilmember Friedson was discussing about the reserves is something that we need to, if we could, hear directly from the bonding, the rating agencies, to let them tell us whether or not what they believe reserves should be, how they should be used. I understand we have a rainy day, we don't call it a rainy day fund, but reserve, it's like a savings account. But in some cases, it's really a comforting account to the bonding agencies, from what I've understood. So I think we need to have that as another conversation, obviously not today, but I think in general, we are heading in the right direction. I think that we handled the budget as horrendous as we all thought the situation was. I think we handled it correctly, and I believe that we need to continue on that path as quickly as we can. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Madalena, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just wanted to let you all know that I think both OMB and Finance are being very aggressive at trying to keep track of what the bond rating agencies are saying about other jurisdictions. Whenever one of the other Maryland counties go out, we try to go to the markets. We have, especially the similar big counties, we've tried to monitor what the rating agencies are saying. We've been in contact with the state treasurer's office, and we're certainly looking for guideposts for how the rating agencies are looking at other counties around the country that are similarly situated to Montgomery County with our tax base, our responsibilities, our size. So we do take that very seriously. Unfortunately, in my experience, the rating agencies don't give you clear answers when you're not actually sitting before them paying for their time. So you can't necessarily call them up and say, hey, is it still 10%? Can it be 8%? What if it's 5%? That's why looking at other jurisdictions and how their ratings are being issued gives us probably the best information about what the current thinking is of the rating agencies. I mean, one of the nice things about this crisis is it's global, so everyone is dealing with the same problem. So the nice part is we're not being held up against to counties that aren't dealing with also very significant economic and health challenges.
Let me add that from my experience of the time that I've been on the council and chairing the committee and meeting with the rating agencies, obviously it's a combination, right, of factors. So, I mean, they're not going to look at one particular policy area, one particular decision. I think it's just how we are presenting ourselves and positioning ourselves vis-a-vis flexibility, but also strength. There's no doubt that during the last crises, which were the recession and then basically a very rough time when I just joined the council, it was a very different crisis. The elements were different, the factors were different. But this was one area that we were pretty weak. I mean, our reserve, we just had to basically rate it. And so what we promised was that we were going to look at a number of elements to position ourselves in a place of strength. That's, I think, where we are. Now, it's the 10% is not even what, supposedly, right, the best practices are for a jurisdiction like ours. It's supposed to be much higher than that, but this is a number that we felt comfortable. And I think that we should have conversations about what we're using it for, because that will determine how exactly we continue to position ourselves, right? And so I agree. I think that we should have that conversation. We said that we were going to try to do this proactively. Of course, nobody knew that there was going to be this crisis hitting us. We thought we were going to have time to be able to be deliberate and to think through a lot of different things. But here we are. But nonetheless, I think it's important to remind ourselves that this particular level of reserve has given us a strength that is quite important and has shown us, I think, how critical it is to continue to meet that particular level. Let's see, Councilmember Fritz. Yes.
Yeah, just quickly, I think there's two questions here. One is the percentage, and we all know and have discussed before the key for the bond rating agencies is to set a target and to fulfill the target, to follow your own plan to demonstrate fiscal discipline. The good news is we've done that. That's put us in the position that we are, which is advantageous. And again, my colleagues deserve a lot of credit for that. The new council members, of which I'm included, got to do the easy part, which is put in the last little bit and take credit for the outcome. But the real tough decisions had to be made prior to that. And we had talked about, once we hit the target, having another policy conversation of what is the appropriate percentage. And that is a perfectly reasonable conversation to have, and an important conversation to have that I think we ought to have in normal times. That would have been the crux of the reserve conversation of what is the right number. And we had already begun that overarching question and conversation of, once we hit the target that we had set, to demonstrate to the rating agencies and to the markets that we are capable of fulfilling our, through fiscal discipline, our targets. Things have changed. And now the main question that we have to have, separate from the percentage, because we don't have the luxury of just making those types of determinations in a vacuum, is the purpose of the use, because now we actually have to use the reserves. And that is a completely different conversation. They're related, because what you use reserves for determines, as Chair Navarro just mentioned, how much you need for reserves. But those are two different policies, related policies, but two separate policies, both of which have to be discussed. And so the comments before about 10% versus 8% versus 6%, that's one part of the conversation, that is, divorced from the current moment that we're in. No matter what, we're going to have that conversation. The conversation that we have to have imminently is, what is the appropriate use for reserves? And there have been a lot of different comments about what reserves should and shouldn't be used for. And I think as a county and as fiscal stewards of public taxpayer dollars, we need to make a formal decision on what the expectations are and what we ought to use those for, because now more than ever, we need to know and residents need to know, and the rating agencies need to know how we're going to be using it as we make the fiscal decisions that we are moving forward.
Thank you. I also I was remiss in not welcoming Vice President Hucker Jawando, and I know Councilmember Bernos as well. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Council President. I know it's a little different. We're not sitting down next to you, so it's a little harder. Good morning to everybody, and thank you for letting us join. I just wanted to echo. I actually agree. I agree with Councilmember Friedson that we should have that conversation. As one of the people who has made some of those comments about how I think we should use reserves, I think it's the perfect time coming out of this, or as we're dealing with this unprecedented global crisis, and after we've met the 10% threshold, which was a very important, I couldn't agree more that that was an important goal and an important threshold to meet. And glad we could do our little bitty part as new council members to help out with that, as was said. And I just wanted to echo that I think that's a very important conversation. Obviously, like any budget, every budget year, this council, the council 2 years from now, people might have different views on this, on the role. But I do think for this council, it would be a good conversation to have, especially in light of where we are in this pandemic, knowing that we are already using reserves for mostly reimbursable things right now, but that we're going to have to dip into it going forward most likely. And so I think that's a great conversation, obviously for committee, but full council. And I appreciate the comments that have been made. And we should have a thoughtful approach to that, to be responsible with how we use taxpayer dollars. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman Jawando. All right, Ms. Medellino, before we wrap up. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much. And to all the committee members, I'm sorry if there is background noise. They are doing work on the roof of the EOB. Since the building is primarily empty, it's a perfect time to do it. But if you hear grinding behind me, that's the new emergency communication tower going up on the top of the building. So I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware that, again, because of the way the crisis is hitting in our fiscal year, we have been taking money out of the reserves to pay for some of the special appropriations, which then we will backfill with some of the federal funds that we have, assuming you pass that appropriation tomorrow to use part of that money. But because of the schedule of revenues coming in, because of the expenditures we've been making, because of the unknown FEMA reimbursements and the fact that you can't use the CRF money and then get a FEMA reimbursement and put federal funds back into the CRF, we might have to forward fund some of the appropriations that we think will be FEMA reimbursed by general funds, get a decision from FEMA, and either then take in those federal dollars or then use our CRF dollars, that we might wind up with a reserve balance that is less than what we've anticipated because of accounting maneuvers and not because we don't have the money. But I just wanted to let everyone know so that we might actually have 10%, 9.5% in our reserves, but when we actually do the calculation on June 30th or when the books are closed, that percentage might be lower, and that's because of sort of the interplay between general funds, our responsibility to respond, and federal funds. So I just wanted to give everyone that heads up so that there's no question when a number comes out that there's a surprise about the number, but that it's how we are responding. So I just wanted to alert everyone of that so it was very clear and transparent.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think that it's been really helpful for us to have the weekly conversations, briefings with the executive and everybody, and also, tracking the expenditures as well as how these things are being maneuvered, because it does give everybody a sense of understanding, and also it's a transparent way of tracking how we are using money, how we're using the federal dollars, et cetera. So I appreciate that. I think that we all, understand that there will be issues such as this one. And as long as they're included in memos or, were updated, et cetera, and we can then explain to the public. That's always really important. Okay, so Mr. Smith, let me just, so for the record, could you just very quickly go over the assumptions right before we vote, just so that it's for the millions watching, that Councilmember Jawanda likes to say?
Sure. So for the millions watching, the fiscal plan, the summary, the complete one are on circle 3 and 4. But the assumptions that are included in this plan, as what we had during March 9th, when the budget was approved on March 19th, are on the bottom of circle 3, which state that the property taxes are at the charter limit with a 692 income tax offset credit. All their taxes are at current rates, and I would also note current assumptions from the March 16th, 2020 recommended budget. Reserve contributions are consistent with legal requirements and the minimum policy level. PAYGO, debt service, and current revenue reflect the approved fiscal 21 and 26 capital improvements program. And then state aid, including CPS and Montgomery College, are not projected to increase like we do every year because we do not know what those numbers are after 21. So those are the assumptions that are included in this fiscal plan. Again, there's 6 years of data available for each fiscal year. And those, again, are on circle 3 and 4 for anyone that wants to look at it later.
Excellent. All right, so I guess I need a motion.
So move.
Moved by Council President Katz.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Friedson. All those in favor of adopting this resolution forwarded to the council, please raise your hand. And it's unanimous by committee vote. Thank you, everybody, for being here for this item. Okay, now moving right along, we're going to have our first update on the racial equity and social justice law implementation. I do think, I see Ms. Ward is here, who is our racial equity social justice officer. I believe that Ms. Elaine Bonner-Tompkins is here as well. Ms. Michelson is here as well, Ms. Singleton. We can get started. And Mr. Drummer, yes, okay. So this is our first update since we passed the racial equity and social justice legislation. We passed this in November of 2019, and it became effective in March of this year. The equity impact notes will not be effective or will not be required until August. So we still have a little ways. I wanted to kind of set the context for this conversation and the many more conversations that we're going to have. And I wanted to share a little bit of what we always refer as dropping a little bit of truth and being completely honest. What inspired me to run for public office was the desire to address inequities, disparities, injustices by sitting at a decision-making table. I had been being real busy working on a community level as an advocate for quite a while, and concluded that it was going to be much more effective and impactful to do whatever I could to try to get at the decision-making table to see if changes, at least the ones that I felt I could make in my, small way, could be effective. After 14 years of proactively proposing policies and laws and funding to address the disproportionality, proposing policies, et cetera, I concluded that we needed legislation that would structurally help this county achieve equity. I believe very strongly, and I've said this before, that working on these issues should not depend on who's sitting in particular seats. We needed to have a structural framework that outlives anyone and that methodically and with urgency goes through every single decision that we make, facing the data to determine if such decision helps eliminate the disparities or exacerbates the existing disparities. And even though it sounds like maybe this is too much, that we can't wait and that this would take too long, the reality is that the more you peel back the layers of the onion of this horrid institutionalized racism that we face in this country, the more you understand that we have to have structural ways to address this and to eliminate it piece by piece with urgency. So it is very interesting that when we embarked on this work last year, it was one of my priorities in my presidency. It's very interesting to think that, we decided to take the year to go through this conversation. We had amazing, I thought, workshops. The entire Montgomery County leadership attended workshops on racial equity, examining the root causes, the history, both for our Black community as well as the Latino community. And I know that we all learned a lot. I mean, I pride myself in being proactive and having educated myself quite a bit, but there was no doubt that I think we all learned a lot, and we really had to reflect on our roles vis-a-vis this history and what we're faced to do and the decisions that we have to make. It's amazing that we had, over 1,000 people participate in the community conversations. Our youth participated in these conversations. We developed a toolkit so more people could engage in the conversation. We have a baseline report on existing disparities in the county. Office of Legislative Oversight also published 2 reports. And so a lot of work went into the goal, getting to the goal of adopting legislation. Little did we know that literally a couple of months later, 2 crises would just come face to face. COVID-19 and people taking the streets saying enough, we don't want to see, we don't want to have to deal with seeing more and more Black men, unarmed Black men being murdered in the streets. And it is really telling, and it's something that actually my daughter has pointed out to me, that the chant, "I can't breathe," applies both to COVID-19 as a pandemic, as well as what we're seeing all over the country when it comes to police brutality. So it's very poignant that this particular phrase, "I can't breathe," which I think many of us, I find myself constantly having to take deep breaths because the scope of these crises are just overwhelming. So who knew that we would be here? And I think it has more than ever put a spotlight on the many reasons why we have to do this work, and we have to do it diligently, and we have to do it with urgency, and it has to be prioritized. There is no doubt. We saw early on, we knew right before the governor decided, and we sent a letter asking him for zip code data. We saw that 20902, a zip code where I lived my first 10 years in the county, to 0904 where I live right now, and to 0906 are the most highly impacted. These are the areas of the county where you have the highest concentration of Latino and Black communities. So we know that when it comes to this issue of public health, and Councilmember Jawanda led the charge on the resolution, we know we have a problem. And now it's just completely, it's just facing us in a consistent way. I want to acknowledge that many people have been working on these issues. The minority health initiatives have been talking about this forever. We have been funding them. We have been doing a lot of things. We have created this network of clinics. I mean, I think that we could all go through so many things that we have done. But as I said earlier, here we are. And this is why we need to have a structural way of figuring out how are we investing our dollars, and how are our policies helping to dismantle this persistent ill in our county and hopefully in our country. And as I said earlier, as I said before, the General Assembly in New York State has introduced this bill. Adam Fogel, who used to work for me, basically asked for permission to take it and have it introduced, and it's making its way. So today, we're here to go through and hear an update on what work has taken place. As you guys all know, we have there is a method to regulation that is required. There's some elements in that, so we want to hear from Tiffany, Ms. Ward, how we're doing, and then also I want to have a conversation about capacity. You know, we were just talking about fiscal issues, but the truth of the matter is that to me, this work is central to everything that we are facing right now. So we need to have the capacity to implement this law. And both on the executive side as well as the council side, it's going to be imperative that we get real, as I said earlier, talk about some truths, make sure that we have the capacity. Because the last thing I want is for us to think that, great, you know, we passed the law, we did these things, it's wonderful, and now, you know, we're done, you know, and not be truthful about the fact that perhaps the capacity is not really there. And so we need to address that, and we need to do it, and we need to do it as soon as possible, because as we've seen, it's actually a matter of life and death for many people. So this has to be a priority. So I really want to thank everybody. Welcome again, Councilmember Joando Albornoz Hucker for joining us. And what we'll do, I will turn to Mr. Drummer to just give us a quick, and I emphasize quick, overview of what the law required. And then I drafted a memo that I hope everybody has. I believe it's in the packet. It was added with an outline of the areas that were contained in the action plan, which is through method to regulation, and then some other questions of these different elements of the legislation, so that we can hear and then engage in a conversation. And lastly, what I'll say to my colleagues is that I hope that you will agree that we may have to address the issue of capacity. And, you know, that might mean something that we haven't done during this process, which is to perhaps add, I don't know, positions or contract help. But for what I've seen so far, I don't believe that we have the capacity to implement this law the way that it has that is structured. So let me turn to Mr. Drummer, and then we'll go through the memo and the questions, and then we'll open it up for discussion with my colleagues. Mr. Drummer.
Good morning. You know, I was going to point out that this is a timely topic, but I was really, more I thought about it, it's been timely to create racial equity and social justice for the entire length of time this country has been in existence. It's just maybe it's time to actually do it. This bill does several things. It created a principal office in the executive branch called the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice, led by a non-merit director. That person was appointed. That's Tiffany Ward, who's here today. There is one vacant position that was funded in the office in the 2021 budget, so it hasn't been filled yet. It also created a 15 voting member citizen panel called the Racial Equity and Social Justice Advisory Committee. The appointees have not been sent over by the executive yet, although I'm told that that's close, and that they have done a lot of interviews. The executive is required to consider and discuss the racial impact and racial and social justice impact of any new programs that are either going to be funded in the budget. The bill took effect March 2nd. The budget came out March 16th. Probably not realistic to have expected the budget to be rewritten with the impact statements 2 weeks later. But certainly we will expect that in the next budget and in any programs that are introduced in the interim. And the bill also required the legislation, all legislation, to have a racial equity and social impact statement. That part of the bill does not take effect until August 1st. and that duty was assigned to the Office of Legislative Oversight. And Elaine Bonner-Tompkins from OLO is here to talk about their progress in implementing that portion of the law. So with that, probably turn it over to Tiffany Ward, unless you have further questions of me.
Okay, so yes, so let me turn it over to Ms. Ward. And as I said, there is an outline of the memo that I included so that we can hear from you, Ms. Ward, in terms of the status of the Method 2 regulation, things like the community engagement process, the racial equity and the social justice training. Bob just mentioned the issue of anytime there's a budget item that is proposed. Obviously, this is something that, we assume will be for ongoing supplementals or next year's budget. Also, understanding the process in terms of the needs for each department and guidelines for also those departments and office to develop the equity action plan. Those, I guess those are generally some of the items included. I'm just going through everything here, but in general. And then if you could also share with us, your observations and the issues of capacity in terms of that position, but then other ways that you believe the administration is able to implement this law, and do you think that actually there's a need for more capacity in that way? So just a few things that we'd like to hear from you.
Thank you guys for having me today. It's been a wild 3 months. It's been a really wild 3 months. It's been a hectic 3 months. To walk into this position probably 2 weeks before COVID-19 hit it's been interesting. So let me address the first of Nancy's questions in the memo, and that's to the Method 2 regulation. So we in the department are actually in the midst of getting a contractor, a consultant to help us develop the Method 2 regs. As we did research and found that very many jurisdictions do have legislation, not very many have Method 2 regulations or regulations that are as extensive as ours. We found that King County is the closest, and even still does not necessarily ask the extensive questions that we do around metrics and things of that sort. So we are in the midst of getting a contractor to help with that. One is a thought partner, two to write, and then we are going to ask our Racial Equity and Social Justice Committee to contribute to that process as well. And I guess while we're on the Racial Equity and Social Justice Committee, I will give you a status report on that. At this moment, we have finished all of our interviews for the 8 community member positions for that body. That body is 15 members, 8 communities, 7 employees. So our 7 employee positions have been sent over, and we will get the other 8 to you. Has been sent over to us rather, and so we will send the whole team of 15 over to you. I will say within maybe a week or 10 days. So that process is finished with the help of a wonderful panel. At this point, our racial equity and social justice action plans have not been completed. Those plans are actually, we saw that as part of our training. So our racial equity leads are going to go through a training process, both with the Racial Equity Institute and with GARE. And as part of that process, we'll learn how to write racial equity action plans. And so those action plans, I think, will be done within that particular training process. In my memo, I showed you kind of a sample training, timeline. And so you can see that in that timeline that the racial equity action plans will be developed during that training process. Let's see, on to the next. Our racial equity assessments will actually be done concurrently. in that training process. And so we expect that that will be done actually much earlier on. So the training process for our racial equity leads will start in August. So Racial Equity Institute training, the training that the leadership went through, will also be available to our racial equity leads. And then in September, they will start their GARE training, which is more of a how to examine policy, examine procedure and processes for disparate impact on equity. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm just going to the next one. So all of our trainings, because we are in a COVID world, will be done virtually. It will be during the last 3 months, both Racial Equity Institute and GARE developed virtual trainings. We are hopeful that they will be as impactful, though, sitting in that room with other members of your community and feeling the energy is very different. But we persist and we will go on, and we will have all of our trainings happening virtually until we can actually be in a room safely together, so that our current environment will not stop the trainings that we have that we've set forward. We are in the midst of hiring for our one FTE, and actually had started that process before the hiring freeze that COVID brought upon us. Got that one position unfrozen, and so I'm in the midst of hiring for that one FTE. I'm hopeful that we will be able to have more hands on deck for this work throughout the year, at least until the next fiscal year. Start on to the next statement. I guess that was our next statement. Do I anticipate that we will need more resources? As I think about this work, and I think about the gravity of this work, and both the internal facing work that the law calls for. So the law is very clear about what we will do for members of our workforce, for bills, for programs, and for management areas, and we are focused on that. But as COVID-19 hit, and as the George Floyd protests hit, it was very clear to me that we also will need more support in how we are training or interacting with our general community around racial equity. There has been an incredible need, an incredible push for my time in addressing racial equity in the county and what that looks like, or just helping communities understand racial equity. And in doing that, we will definitely need more help in our department, as we're set to do two things, right? Structure this department, focus on bills, programs, procedures, and processes, but also keep the momentum that we gained in the last year, and keep the will of our community focused on this work. And so in that case, I think we will need more support there. We'll need more administrative support. And I think our one FTE will help with our training, but I would also like a policy person who focuses particularly on public safety. So that's my statement there. Our racial equity impact statements, I will leave that to Elaine. Our advisory board, I've given you guys an update on. Will we be ready for our reports on September 30th and December 1? So our September 30th report, I really don't see why we would not. We will. Right now, we're on course to finish hiring, to start our trainings, to hopefully have the very beginnings of our racial equity and action plans, and our assessments hopefully will be done by then. And we will report on that. And our December 30 or December 1 report is really a report from our board. Our board will be sat by July, and so I think that they will be in a place to talk about their work, to talk about their training and the needs of the community from the department. So I don't see why we would not be on course to finish those reports. And lastly, A vision for a proactive response to community demands for training and restructuring of government. This is ongoing for me. This has been, I could just tell you, just in the last 3 weeks, I've probably gotten 20 to 25 requests from civic associations, from internal and external boards and groups about talking about racial equity and what that means. So my vision for that really is to have a team both in the department and to use our racial equity and social justice board to do that work. That is one, because the team will be multicultural. Two, our team from the Racial Equity and Social Justice Board will be also multicultural. And two, I think it's a way for us to disperse the information kind of broadly across the county. And then it does not center the work just on one person. So my vision there is to spread that amongst the employees as well as our board members. Are there any other questions? So I am scheduled to actually talk to Dr. Stoddard on Wednesday about what a racial equity lens looks like for this recovery process. And I've been in contact with Dr. Gales throughout this crisis. From the very beginning, facilitating conversations with community members about resources needed and services needed. So that's both with Dr. Gales and with Dr. Crowell. And I anticipate that I will be asked to sit on a health advisory board for the health department to help them put in a racial equity gaze into their work. So I hope I addressed all your the questions in your memo, Nancy. Please feel free to ping me if I did not. I want to say this. While we are in need of other resources, I want you to understand that we are also looking at other resources outside the government. Our racial equity institute training that is going to be done for our committee is actually going to be paid for by the Consumer Health Foundation. So we are looking for grants and other outside monies to support this work. This is not just a one-way street. We are looking as many places as we can to garner the kind of support, both financially and through interns and things of that nature, to buoy the work and to get us the resources that we need to get this work done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So very quickly, so I know that, for example, in San Francisco, the minute that COVID-19 hit, the mayor there literally stood up an equity team to work through the whole arc of the pandemic in order to address many of the issues. I'll be honest, it hasn't been clear to me how the equity piece has been integrated. I know that almost every single briefing that I attend, I ask that question, and many of my colleagues ask that question, but I haven't seen an actual plan that says, for example, yes, we know that these are the most impacted zip codes. The trend has held. So what are we doing strategically to address that? For example, there were hubs established in the county, but not in those zip codes immediately. So I was curious as to whether that kind of approach has taken place. So not just asking you to be there to talk to them about, seeing things through an equity lens, but actually strategically deploy best practices or particular programs in the zip codes that have been identified as being the most impacted. Is that, maybe that's happening, I just haven't been clear.
That was, I'll just speak to the kind of the Go Teams model and some of the other work that I was working on with Travis and Dr. Crowell. So that was the idea. So the idea was to have those teams in particular and those services particularly focused on those zip codes. And if not the teams, then that is where the health clinics or the, what do we call them? The pop-up testing centers were to go. the hubs, meaning, are you speaking of the food hubs?
Yeah, I mean, they have, I think, at least the one in Germantown is more than food, right? So they're
Yeah, so
distributing
there's
other
food, there's
things,
diapers, there's,
and there's some case management happening as well.
right. So that one, as far as I knew, was outside of the government's purview. That was not necessarily through us. And you're correct. The one that happened in Wheaton, or was supposed to happen in Wheaton, I just think took a little longer to set up than we had anticipated.
Right, but I mean, I know that we've had this conversation with other folks. The truth is that, right, if it was born out of the community because they clearly understood what was needed and they were able to nimbly establish it, but then they asked the county for support, and now it has almost been an adopted model. So I was just curious as to, what kind of comprehensive strategies were enacted, especially in those high impacted zip codes, other than the GO teams. I just wanted to observe that because it's something that I have been asking, and I know many of my colleagues, and I wasn't sure if we had an actual equity team, that had been activated the minute that the pandemic hit.
I wouldn't call it an equity team. I'm not, no, I wouldn't call it an equity team.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that. I'm going to turn it over to some of my colleagues, and then after this conversation, then we'll address the council side of this work as well. I will only observe that the reason why King County is the other jurisdiction that does have the legislation and method 2 regulation, but it's not as strict, is because I spent a lot of time talking to Matia Valenzuela and identifying the gaps and the things that they wish to do differently. And that's why ours is a little stronger, because it was some lessons learned from what they've done over there. So I would like to say that ours is a pretty well-rounded one. So I have Councilmember Joanna and then Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just following up, Ms. Ward, Ms. Bonner-Tompkins, and Ms. Singleton, it's really cool to see the Holy Trinity here working on the bill here, three black women. I just want to point that out, and letting Bob tag along for advice. That's the way it should be. Let me ask you this, Ms. Ward. I've seen, we've talked about this before, and to the point you raised about capacity and making sure that within different agencies of government that there's fidelity and understanding on how to implement this mission, and so that you are not called, okay, let's call Ms. Ward in her office to write our equity plan and to help us figure out what equity is, right? And I know that's not the goal or intent of the legislation. How is that going, and how do you envision, could you talk about that intersection? Because one of the things I've always been worried about, and I've seen this in the federal government, other things I've worked on, is you create an office that's, small, and it has a mission, but the difficulty of ingraining that mission, and there's going to be no other more difficult task than having people, understand why racial equity, what it is, why it's important, and how it must be embedded in everything we do to detangle institutional racism from all its systems. And so that's going to require, and I know that's why we're going through the trainings, but have you confronted any challenges so far, or do you see, and talk to me about the plan and how it's going to get that into the level of each department and county government? And do you feel that are you doing liaisons, or how is it working? Can you talk to me about that and what you see as opportunities and challenges and where you are in that process? I hope that was a clear question.
Thank you. Sure. So I anticipate that there have been some challenges, just even in the COVID environment. And because this is happening so quickly, because people are responding so quickly, and if I catch wind of a response that I don't think is equitable, and then reaching back out to those departments to say, hey, this is kind of not how we should do things. I think that there is because this is so urgent, kind of a push more for speed as opposed to equity, and so that has been a bit of a challenge. But I will say We've also had departments, and sometimes the same departments, come to me and say, hey, you know what, we think that this is incredibly urgent. How can we start this process even before we have picked our leads? We have employees who really want to talk about the George Floyd situation. We really have employees who are struggling with this and want to be given the right language for this. And so I've started informal relationships in those departments and asked them to really see the concept of not just the racial equity leads, but also the racial equity in core teams. And so it's different across departments, and it's different across directors. Some have reached out, some have not yet reached out. I anticipate that everybody will know the seriousness or understands the seriousness of this work now. I anticipate that this will, I won't say it will not be as difficult, it will not be as hard to sell when we're talking about the reasons that racial equity is paramount. So I found that is the case in most departments. So it has not been a difficult sell, and I think COVID has done that for us, and the George Floyd protests have done that for us. Some folks have been more, have actually been more proactive in reaching out and wanting to start the work even before they have gone through training or before they've decided who their lead person is. So that has been encouraging.
How many lead people do you have identified already?
So just a handful. They won't be required to do that until the 1st of August, so that last week of July. But I would say probably 3 or 4, and in some pretty big departments. And that's outside of the racial equity committee, right, which has 7 departments that have to give us leads, basically, or have to participate in that committee. So, and the departments that have are pretty prominent departments, so I'm encouraged by that.
That's great. Well, I have to underscore what Council Member Navarro mentioned about the resources. I think we are at such a critical moment in history, and I'm really thankful we're in such a strong position, having this legislation being implemented, taking the steps we've taken, with other bills we passed, with the resolution last week. And the worst thing that could happen is that with all this interest and all this energy and urgent need, that we don't have the ability to respond and get people the training and get people the resources and get things embedded and get the plans in place, the support. And so I just really want to emphasize that if there were a critical time as we're setting this up and really starting off on the right track, this is the time to make sure that we can respond and do that. So please be open. I know you will be, with us about what you think is required as you're getting it up and going. That's good to hear that things are off to a good start.
Yeah, and the training is on track. Really, we set up the training to be, the office right now in the FY20 budget just has my salary in it. It has no other budget. And so really my idea was to be ready when July 1 hit so that we can start to spend down our money on training, on services, and on the other supports that the department needs. And right now we're on track to start with our trainings, to have our committee stood up and ready to work. So I feel like we are on track to do our work. Will there be some surprises in the next few months? I'm sure there will. That 2020 has proven that that's what it's all about, surprises. So, yep.
And the last thing I'll say, since we have Marlene, Ms. Michelson is here as well, and Elaine, I know we're going to get to the legislative part. But one of the things that we emphasized in the resolution last week, concerning race and public health, is that we need to have all of our staff trained, and the legislative side. And I know that's part of the goal, but I think there is an urgent need, especially as we are in real time trying to respond to the effects of COVID and the effects of systemic and institutional racism. That as a full branch of government, and we have a smaller amount of people. I just think we need to do that yesterday. I know our leadership was trained, many of our staff, but I think getting the remaining would be important. So thank you for all your work. And I'll probably come back when Dr. Tompkins has a question, but I'll yield for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Joando. Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Ward, you must be exhausted. I have been on a lot of Zoom calls, and you're on, I think, just about all the same ones with regards to this work. And I do think that I just want to begin by thanking you personally and the entire executive branch. I know everybody is working around the clock on these issues. And I know you must be exhausted professionally, emotionally, and in every other way imaginable. And so I want to begin from that space, just knowing how hard this work is. And as we all know, how important it is and how unique this moment in time is. We've received in our office, and I'm sure all of my colleagues have received the same emails, literally thousands of emails with regards to police reform, defunding police, what that means, what it doesn't mean. And to our Madam Chair's point, the operationalizing of this system is now more important than ever before. And so you referenced, Ms. Ward, the GO teams as an example. You know, we had a committee session last week, and I think Dr. Gales and Dr. Crowell have done incredible work, but acknowledge that hasn't gone the way they would like it to. And there's a lot of lessons learned through that process. And I also want to be realistic about expectations for you and your team. You are getting bombarded by emails, phone calls, requests to participate in meetings, which all takes time. And so you're being pulled in probably every direction imaginable right now. And so I do have a couple of questions specifically. This is a little editorial for right now. But you know, one of the things that I think the administration did well in partnership with the council, and Councilmember Navarro and I were heavily involved in these discussions, was an acknowledgement that there was a huge deficiency in our multilingual outreach through the pandemic. And so a team was formed. We took staff from other departments, and this was made a priority. It has not been perfect. There continue to be challenges, but we are in a better place than we were before. And I think an operational structure similar to that is really necessary right now. Because I agree, and I think all of my colleagues agree, that you need more help. You need more staff assistance moving forward. But even in a best case scenario, if we are able to appropriate funds, which is going to be difficult in this environment, it takes months for us to hire people and train them and bring them on board. And we have an immediate crisis right before us. And so this is not really a question for you because you're not in a position to be able to do this yourself. This is more of a question for the second floor and administration. How are we going to structure operationally borrowing from our existing resources within the Office of Human Rights, the Office of Community Partnerships, various departments and agencies who their work has been refocused because of the pandemic? I think there needs to be a team approach in the short term, like tomorrow, on facilitating a discussion and then working with the council collaboratively to help you guys stand that up and operationalize it. Because I'm worried about the bandwidth and want to make sure you have the support that you need moving forward. So I'm sure you'll have a comment regarding all of that. I do have a question embedded in that.
Okay.
And that is, given how overwhelming all of this is right now, how are you prioritizing? Is it organic? Is there some internal process that you're following? Because, you know, everything is important, but everything is receiving so much attention right now. It must be difficult to process all of that. So you want to respond to any of that? And I would love to know that, how you're dealing with all that.
So I want to respond to the first part. In fact, thinking that very same thing, I had a conversation just last week with our chief administrative officer and some other folks on the second floor about what it would look like to detail people to the chief equity officer, to the racial equity and social justice department. In order to do the research on regs, I got one of the librarians from who's at home right now because they can't be on site to help do research for me. So we are trying to be creative about responding to this moment, and so we are looking at a detail kind of model and detailing people from different departments who could help support different kinds of work. And so that's a little bit to what you were speaking of and talking about the fact that they were acknowledging that there just aren't enough hands. And so we are looking at that model, and I'm actually drafting another position description of what those positions would look like, how long they would stay within the department, and the roles that they would play. So we are thinking about that. I love that you all are also on that same wavelength. How I am prioritizing. So at the beginning of this pandemic, I really was focused, quite frankly, on getting our Racial Equity Social Justice Board up, on hiring until that freeze, and then trying to basically get the legs of the department together during this pandemic. And once the I'll say the data on who was being hit by COVID-19 was released, my focus really was, how do I assist the health department? How do I assist HHS in getting services to those zip codes? I thought policy is important, but people are dying, hurting, needing to be fed now. So then the focus then was, how do I assist there? How do I assist in making sure that the dollars that were allocated by you all actually are allocated in a way that they're actually getting to the communities that they're intended for? So then it was about inserting myself into processes to make sure that there was a racial equity lens there, because there's not a process right now. There's not a procedure. There's nothing on the books. So for me, it was, this is happening now. These dollars need to be appropriated in a way that our communities are getting these dollars, that they are supported, that we are being creative, that we're engaging community, all of that, right? And right now, as COVID wanes, it is not over, I'm focused on recovery and how we basically use this opportunity. This recovery really is an opportunity to remake systems. So how do we remake systems in a way that racial equity is considered first and not an afterthought? So there's that. And so I'm working with the team and doing a very abbreviated training on how to do that, and trying to build capacity within our the executive side, so that people are using this lens when they are rebuilding systems. And then, of course, with the George Floyd protest, this really, I also see this as an opportunity. So I am trying to be, trying to exert myself in a way that helps us see this as a public safety challenge, but also as a way to look differently at this work, and how we interact with communities that have been hardest hit by police brutality, by police killings. So that's kind of been my process. So it's been, structural, of course, but also thinking about the current processes that we are standing up immediately that will only last 3 months, right? And trying to insert there, and then, of course, back to structure, and then trying to grab this opportunity as we rebuild our county and our systems, and have them be strong in racial equity, and actually consider the needs of our Black and Brown communities and Asian communities, quite frankly, in a way that's prominent. So that's a little bit of my process. I've gotten some assistance from GARE, which is the Government Alliance for Racial Equity, and other chief equity officers who are trying to do the very same thing. In fact, the chief equity officer for Minneapolis is also one of our colleagues, and so it has really been that's been a great community to be a part of since we've been dealing with this. So that's a little bit of my process, Gabe. I'm not sure if hopefully I answered your question.
No, you did. I appreciate that very much, Ms. Ward. I know that that it helps to definitely understand. All of us have attended various protests over the last 2 weeks. One of the most striking for me was there were about 600 or 700 people in Kensington that marched through, and we went through Kengar. And it was primarily Caucasian folks who were on this march. And everybody in the circle that I was in as we were marching was like, they didn't even know that community was there. And so this is an enlightening moment. And our attention span, let's face it, as a society is as small as a gnat. And so, there will be some other crisis that emerges before us between now and the election, and keeping our attention on this and building on this momentum is, I know, something that I'm sure is probably keeping you up at night, keeping me up at night, trying to figure out how we ride this wave in the most productive and efficient way possible.
Right. Right. I think, to your point, I think this is why, I feel a particular obligation to make it to as many of the Zoom invitations that I can, but I want to be fair also to the structural work, right? And that there is only one me. And so I am trying to keep this work in the forefront of the whole community while also creating processes and procedures that let us strip away the systems that have gotten us here in the first place. So that's the push and pull. That is the push and pull.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate those responses, your candor, your hard work, your passion, and look forward to working with you and the entire executive branch as we move into this next phase of this critically important work. But thank you very much, Ms. Ward.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that exchange really did put into focus this notion of the equity team concept. So just as, again, other jurisdictions sort of stood that up. So maybe we can work together, colleagues, and approach the executive with that similar kind of concept. As Tiffany, as you're working on the structural pieces, like you were saying, it is going to be important, I think, to try to, bring together, even if it is temporary, but to just get a lot of the substantive work in place. And that allows you then to do a lot of the different things that you just described. So I think that would be an important outcome of this conversation, because it is so widespread right now in terms of the demands on you, that having a formalized team, even though it's not called for in the legislation, but I think it's a great flexible and nimble way to respond to this moment in time. So that's just something that I think I would love for the committee and then my colleagues here for us to follow up on as soon as possible. Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you so much, and I am just very pleased to be able to join this committee and our council, and really appreciate all of the work Ms. Ward and Ms. Bonner-Tompkins and others have done already. I think it recognizes that we've made a lot of progress, but we have a lot more work to do in the county, and it's become increasingly evident to more and more people of how necessary this work is, and I really appreciate Councilmember Navarro, your work and your leadership on all of these efforts. We've talked about it before, but when we're talking about addressing institutionalized racism, we need an institutionalized solution, and that's really what this is about. And these structures that we're talking about today are so critical to putting in place in order to make the type of structural reform that is so needed and that is so clearly evident in all of the data and in all of the work that has been done. And I'm curious as part of this, because I see this really interesting balance between, on the one hand, putting this structure in place, which is a tremendous amount of work, which takes time, and also the urgent need for action that is being called for at a feverish pitch from the community and from residents and from us. And curious, twofold. One, how do we balance that? How do we balance, on the one hand, setting up the long-term sustaining structures that this bill and this work requires, while also participating in the COVID calls and being part of the work, as we talked about earlier. I love the idea, as was referenced earlier, about detailing more staff and more resources. We don't have time to initiate new recruitments to put this in place, but just curious, Ms. Ward, if you could share with us, your thoughts on balancing those two things, because I see that critically in the next several months, in the next couple of years, of how those two things dovetail, both with the work of the committee, with your work and your efforts, and then also based on the relationship that you talked about earlier in Minneapolis and in other equity officers and other jurisdictions around the country. If we have lessons learned, not just with setting up these structures and with implementing this institutionalized support, but any best practices on COVID, any best practices on other issues and policy matters that we are dealing with in real time, and whether or not we are learning from that, and whether or not we have any concrete actions and concrete ideas that we've gleaned that we're able to operationalize as well.
I guess on balancing, on how do we balance both the structural and the current needs. Besides that, we just do. Besides, I think the council, and if I'm frank, I think the county has done better than most jurisdictions on this coast of balancing those needs. We have allocated more money, both to food, both to financial need, to business need, than any other jurisdiction close to here. That's Fairfax, that's DC, that's anybody else. I don't think anybody has let go of any of their local resources the way that we have. And that's something I know from our gear setup. So I think that there's that, right? So there's just the immediate paying attention to the immediate needs of people in the midst of this. And then to the structural needs, I think we have to continue as we examine the work, not just of this department, but of all the other departments, to continue to focus on how these departments are meeting the needs of these communities, right? So whether it's housing, which should be first and foremost to stability of Black and brown folks or poor people, quite frankly, we have to kind of hold the line on what our expectation is and what the long-term policy goals are for us around affordable housing, around transportation, right? All of which are foundational to how these communities survive not just COVID, but survive period, and how they thrive, right? So I think that structurally, the key is not to just hold this department accountable, but to hold every department accountable to the place that they have in setting up racial equity in this county and in the country, right? And so I think about what else when we even talk about how our food or our food distribution, or even, quite frankly, our business community has responded to this. I think that we structurally have to have goals and I'll say targets for them to meet in this work. So I think that structurally it is really incumbent upon us to keep all of those, to hold all of those folks accountable to how they are meeting the needs of this population. And to the immediate, I think the council and the county has done a reasonably good job in trying to meet the immediate needs of this moment. So I don't know if I really answered your question there, but it is, Andrew. But I think that it's racial equity in everything. It's racial equity in everything, not just racial equity for the racial equity and social justice department. And so I think that we have to hold all of our folks accountable for this and do it, right now. And if, we are working on training, we will give assistance as we can, but we need people to have this in the forefront of their brains on all things. And we will continue to balance. We will continue to build the structures, to evaluate the structures, and continue to meet the immediate need. What was the second half of your question?
You pretty much covered it, so I appreciate it. It was about learning from other places. You talked about how we're doing better than most, and
it's fascinating to see. The fact of the matter is that a lot of folks are trying to use the CARES money to respond to needs, and I think that that's absolutely the way to do that. But I think this county was one of the first and one of the few to use local dollars and to do so quickly. In addressing the needs of their community without necessarily waiting for those dollars. So I think, Montgomery County needs to be commended for that.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm glad you referred to, have been thinking throughout this conversation about this broader issue of racism and the burden that it places on folks, and the risk that we run of placing too much of a burden on you and your office, and that this is not just the work of one individual or one group of employees or one office. It needs to be the work of all of us, and it's true in our county, it's true in our community, and I think you said it better than I could, so I will not try to restate it, but just to try to amplify the comments that you made, and I take it to heart and I appreciate the comment.
Thank you.
Yeah, let me just observe that is precisely why this issue of capacity is so important, because the legislation wasn't meant to just have, Ms. Ward and her department responsible for equity for county government, or the idea was that every single department has to develop their action plans, and they have, and your role really is to make sure that all those things are occurring, and or provide perhaps also some technical assistance, right, at moment in time. But it wasn't just to say that now that we've done this, check that box, and then you're responsible for equity for the entire, county government. And that is really important. I think it goes to that issue of capacity, because if you don't have the capacity, it is very easy for everybody to kind of gravitate to that model, which we know has not worked. But we know that both governments and corporations tend to do that, right? They're like, oh, we have a diversity training, check the box. We have a diversity officer, check the box. We don't have issues, except that you do. And so, I just want to make sure that we are clear that that is not what we're trying to do, and that we do whatever we need to do to give you, as well as the rest of the, county government folk, departments, et cetera, the capacity to really do that work at fidelity, as it was mentioned earlier. Council President Katz.
Thank you very much. I'm off of mute. You always have to check now. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you for all of your work on this, and all my colleagues for their observations as well. Ms. Ward and Ms. Bonner-Tompkins, thank you for all of your hard work. When we talk about systemic problems, we have to actually look at the system. We have to take the time and realize what we've done, how we've done it, and admit to the history. And many times it's a horrific history, but we have to admit to what has taken place. And I think that's the first step in correcting any problem. And we've certainly taken some more than first steps, but we've taken some dramatic steps. Far from there yet, but we need to continue the conversation. And of course, in many cases, people didn't have the conversation because they didn't want it was unpleasant. It was something that they felt somebody would not feel comfortable having, and so therefore you avoided it. It wasn't because they didn't realize that there was a problem, but they didn't want to have the unpleasant conversation with somebody. They didn't want to make somebody feel bad. Those days are gone. We have to have the conversations and make each of us feel, understand what we're doing. But like has been said many, many times today, and probably many, many more times than just today, your task is monumental. And I'm very concerned that we're really asking to you, everyone who's doing this work directly, we're asking too much. If we don't give you the proper resources, if you don't have the proper resources, then this is well-meaning, but it's not going to be life-changing, and we need life-changing. And so, I to the point that the assistance that you need, please do not be bashful. I know each of you, and I know you're not bashful, but please do not, because we have to know what we need to do. And then it gets to, and Ms. Ward mentioned this, the accountability part. It is one thing to go to a department or the business community or whoever and say, this is what should be done. But then we need to make certain that they have the resources in order to do it. To the point earlier about checking a box is probably the easiest thing on this that we're doing. It's changing what that box just had to be checked for is the bigger concern. And if we don't give the resources to the group that needs to be making those changes, even if they have a wonderful heart, it's not going to change. They're not going to be able to do it. So we have to do all of that at the same time, during a time when money is tighter than it's probably ever been and certainly in recent history, and maybe it will be in history for any of us. But we need to make certain that we have the dialogue, not just with each other, but that we have the dialogue with the people, the organizations, the departments that we're trying to help, that we're trying to correct. We have to have that dialogue, and they have to be forthcoming and to tell us what resources they're going to need in order to do what we all want them to be doing. And candidly, in many cases, it's what they know that they need to do, but they have to tell us. So I applaud you, I thank you, and I have to tell you, your task is unbelievable.
Thank you, Mr. President. So now let's move on to the County Council side. As you know, this legislation has, addresses both sides. The executive side, of course, as it was just described, as well as our legislative branch, because in August, every legislation will have to have an equity impact note. Obviously, the idea is that through data, once you have data in front of you, just as we take into consideration a lot of the information provided to us by our analysts, having an equity impact note with data, will guide us in terms of our particular work. And I know that Dr. Bonner-Tompkins obviously has already begun to do some extraordinary work in many of the reports that she has authored. I know that Ms. Singleton has also been approached. But the reason I also wanted to bring Ms. Michelson before I turn it over to Ms. Tompkins and Ms. Singleton as well, the reason why I wanted to have Ms. Michelson is because of a similar concern with the capacity on the executive side. Now, of course, the County Council has a much smaller complement of staff, there's no doubt. But the reality is that this is a very comprehensive, extensive task. And so it is going to be critical that that we have dedicated staff to this and not necessarily have people like Ms. Singleton, who of course is our clerk and she has a lot on her plate. I know this, Dr. Bonner-Tompkins, this is an area that she is extraordinarily well versed in, et cetera, and would want to, of course, contribute to this. But the truth of the matter is that we need to have at least a staff person that is dedicated to lead this effort and then work in conjunction with Dr. Bonner Tompkins and all the analysts, just like we were just saying, right? Because this is going to cut across all the different policy areas that we are working on. But I don't think it sets us up for success if we decide, to put something so monumental such as this on the plate of staff that already has, extraordinarily full plates. It is, I don't think, the proper way for us to go about this. So I wanted Ms. Michelson here so we can talk a little bit about whether there are existing vacancies. And I think as a council, we're going to have to make a very important decision about fighting for a position at least to start us off. I know that we are dealing with a lot of different fiscal challenges, but as it's been stated before, this issue cuts through, as we've seen, not just the pandemic, but also this very important urgent work. And we can't just, in my opinion, kind of delegate that to folks on our staff who already have so much going on. So I wanted to frame this conversation in that way. And so let me first hear from Dr. Bonner Tompkins in terms of some of the work that has started, and Ms. Singleton, if you have something to say, and then Ms. Michelson, perhaps you can tell us a little bit about what are those opportunities that you might have so that we can support you in hiring, a lead person for this work. Just for a moment, just imagine how broad and how, comprehensive this task is going to be, not just now, but going forward. So, so I wanted to frame it in that way. And so let me turn first to Dr. Bonner Tompkins.
Thank you, Chair Navarro. I just want to briefly go over some of the items that were included in the memo for our packet this morning. And also just really sort of give you and the entire county kudos for being in this position where, with all that's going on with COVID and the George Floyd protests, the county is really poised to really make equity a reality based on the work that has preceded this. And so it's of course sad what has happened, but it creates an amazing opportunity to really do this work in a way that's going to be meaningful to people in their lives. So although we have a small chunk of the racial equity and social justice work where we're tasked to do the racial equity and impact assessments for any new bill effective August 1st. And so as part of that, we've been laying out the plan for how do we do that. We have also have received in our current budget, our fiscal 21 budget, we have an FTE that we have been funded for to actually do the analysis, the racial equity impact assessment analysis. So we are, in terms of trying to develop our plan for how to do the racial equity impact assessments, we're focused on collecting more data around disparities that complements the racial equity profile that was produced last year. In particular, we're trying to figure out what departments are doing to collect this data, and we're trying to work in partnership with county staff toward that end. We're also working on developing a tool to help do the assessments. We're also trying to figure out a process for including members of the community as part of the assessment process. What's ideal is to actually have communities that are going to be impacted help to contribute to the bills themselves. But in the absence of that happening, we want to make sure that that process is included in the development of the assessment impact statement. We articulate what our timeline is in the packet. Again, we have 3 weeks from the time that the bill is introduced to be able to generate the impact statement. And then we also envision that there is a training that our staff as well as council analysts need to have around what is racial equity and social justice so that we'll be able to execute these assessments in the fall. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. Ms. Singleton, anything you'd like to add?
Yes, a couple of things. First of all, we actually had it. The staff has been meeting in small meetings and in large meetings, and one of the things that we did do sort of originally when I came on, I've been here for 6 months, is meet with the directors of the legislative branch because, as you know, in the bill it talks about the fact that each department is supposed to designate a lead. And so the meeting that we had really to talk with the Merit System Protection Board, the Office of Legislative Oversight, the Office of Zoning and Administrative Appeals, and others was to determine whether or not there needed to be one lead for the legislative branch and the branch offices, or if, each of those departments needed to have their own. And as you know, for some of those departments, there are just 2 or 3 people. So they collectively agreed that there would be one lead, and I am that designated lead right now. In addition to that, we have been, as I said, meeting in small meetings and large meetings. Most recently, last week, there were 70 of us from the council staff who were on an all-staff meeting via video conference. And as Dr. Bonner-Tompkins mentioned, the murder of George Floyd really did impact a lot of us personally and professionally. And it was during that meeting that we heard really detailed and intricately described painful, real-life personal issues with regard to the staff. The conversation was bookended at the beginning by a discussion by a Black mother sharing her need to have the talk with her Black teenage son. And then throughout the discussion and at the end of the discussion, white privilege and hashtag end white silence. And there were several members of the staff and the fellows who reached out afterwards with calls and emails who asked about the bill itself. They really wanted to make sure that they understood that. And so one of the things that we're going to do this week, in fact, both Dr. Bonner-Tompkins and Ms. Ward have agreed to meet with the staff to talk about the bill, what's in it, and to answer any questions. And we also want to work on subject matter issues. As all of you have indicated, housing and education, and these are all issues that work throughout the council and your work. And of course, police reform and COVID-19 is right in our face right now. So those are some of the things that we want to work on. Next week, Dr. Bonner-Tompkins has agreed to do some training with the staff. I know that all of you have asked about this. So that will start next week on Friday. And finally, we've also started working on the action plan, just sort of thinking about it, not working on it, I should say. But definitely the staff has been sharing information about anti-racism, webinars, articles, other resources, and perhaps talking to and about speakers coming in. So that's just a little bit about what's been going on our side.
Thank you so much. Ms. Michelson, so in terms of this notion of, the council having an actual staff that is hired to then, lead and coordinate all of this work, can you talk a little bit about that possibility? Again, I think, it's awesome that Ms. Singleton has, stepped up to want to help with this. Obviously, Dr. Bonner-Tompkins, this is something that I know she is well versed in, et cetera, but I do worry about this approach, given, again, the enormity of and the very difficult nature of, what we're doing, which is literally starting with a totally new approach. I mean, we've never done this before, right? So I sometimes joke, because I know it happened to me a lot in my years, where, somebody would identify a staff person that was bilingual, and then all of a sudden it's like, hey, can you translate this and this and this and this? And it's like, well, I was hired to do something, but not to be the translator. But so I want to make sure that, again, we have the capacity versus asking our amazing staff to add something like this, of this enormity, to their portfolio. So if you could talk a little bit about, how we can handle this, and whether you see an opportunity in terms of vacancies for us to actually hire someone to be the lead.
Yes, I'd be happy to address it. Let me start out by saying we do have some vacancies on council staff, and our plan was to freeze some vacancies because we have been told that a savings plan is coming. And I would love to see the staff, fully all these vacancies filled. If you will recall, during the budget, in addition to these vacancies in the budget we had submitted, there were some additional positions that we've already deleted. So let me tell you how we're managing everything, because I feel like in this area and so many others, we are trying to sort of make do with the resources we have and be a little bit of creative. And, I can't tell you that is ever the ideal approach to dealing with an issue that's important to you, but the trade-off here is between the fiscal constraints and how we can make things work. If you remember, early in this year, which seems like a lifetime ago, the council staff developed an interim racial equity strategy to try and begin implementing it. Ms. Mendy Singleton has already shared with you some of the things we've been doing. We've been meeting. We've been trying to get a head start on the action plan that we will have to develop. In theory, that will happen after we get guidance from the Racial Equity and Social Justice Office, but we thought it was too important for us to wait until they're ready for that guidance, for us to sort of begin our own initiatives, our own training in advance of the official training that the office might offer, and you've already heard a little bit about that. As part of our interim strategy, we said that we would form a racial equity and social justice team at the council that would include members of council member staff offices, the central staff, and the other legislative branch offices to try and implement this. Ms. Mendy Singleton is our lead in this response, but I recognize how busy she is. And Nicole Rodriguez Hernandez is going to be assisting her to try and provide some backup support so that the management of this effort does not fall totally on her. So between the two of them leading the effort and the team, I think we'll make good progress. Once again, I can't tell you that it wouldn't be ideal to have additional staff that can be dedicated solely to this purpose. You already know the role of Ms. Mendy Singleton as our clerk and all that involves. And Nicole as well has other areas that she's going to be working on, but right now we really don't have single staff members focused on any issues. Everyone's doing a little bit of trying to cover multiple issues so that we can manage the workload of the council without building up the staff until our fiscal crisis passes.
Thank you for that. Councilman Albornoz.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So I totally acknowledge that, we're in a tough fiscal situation. We have to put the hiring freeze, I think, makes sense conceptually, but as we've discussed and as we're feeling during this moment in time, I think we have to move these forward as quickly as possible because, we are literally receiving thousands of pieces of correspondence right now from our community at large, and this is a really critical time for us to have the support structure in place to be able to act in a meaningful and authentic way to meet this moment. And I have been blown away by our central office staff, by the staff of all of my colleagues who are volunteering at food distribution sites, who are helping to translate documents, who are dealing with unbelievably difficult and complex constituent issues that require follow-up and a great deal of time. And we're doing all of this virtually, and I don't think it's sustainable. And so I do think it's important that we move these positions forward to put us in the best possible position to meet this moment, and that's something I would support strongly.
Thank you, Councilmember Albornoz. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Councilmember Navarro, Council Chair. I would agree 100%. I think this is too important to have people who are already working very hard in multiple jobs, including the clerk of the council, who has very significant responsibility. In addition to Miss Dr. Elaine Bonner Tompkins, who I just know personally things I've asked her to work on our full caseload, and I don't know what else she's working on. And so, I think we need to move forward. As Councilmember Arbogast mentioned, we've gotten thousands of notes just on police accountability, and not to mention all the many ways, as we've said in our resolution last week, declaring racism a public health crisis, all the many ways Black and brown people are dying due to racism. And for us not to invest in a staff member or have consulting resources and or both to help us with fidelity and with seriousness, to Councilmember President Katz's point, address and have a plan in each of these areas, we wouldn't be doing our job. And so I understand it's a difficult crisis, but part of what we're called to do is to look at the budget in totality. And I actually think there are, we're going to need to reallocate many resources within savings plans and as we look at the budget next year. And so this position for a branch of government to, with fidelity, do its job in managing budget and resources of the county, we must have someone who's focused on this full time, in my view. So I think we need to, despite where we are, I think this is a critical component of where we are, so I think, Ms. Michelson, I thought we included, I guess the question embedded in this statement is, I know we had very limited inclusion in our same services budget, but how many vacancies do we have that we could look at potentially to translating into one of these spots?
We currently have 6 vacancies. However, as I told the council earlier on, 2 are going to be filled at a junior level with policy analysts to take the place of staff we've lost over the past year. And one of them was an administrative that's not being filled or being held. And we have 3 additional vacancies that I was planning to freeze to help address the request for a savings plan. And, of course, I will agree, whatever the council wants to do in terms of the council office budget, I am happy to implement your direction.
Okay, I appreciate that. I mean, I know this is a work session and no votes or anything, but at the appropriate time, I would be supportive of a motion to take one of those 3 vacancies to convert to a spot for this. So thank you, Council President.
Thank you. Yes, so I think that what we'll do is work with Council President Katz to see what is the best way to move forward. I, more than anyone, super careful about where we are with our fiscal situation. My biggest concern is that, we're sort of saying that, we're seeing, the light at the end of the tunnel with COVID-19, but the reality is that now as we engage in the phased, reopening and recovery, number one, we will not know, right, if we're going to have to face another wave. So that's, to be determined. But even as we do the recovery, et cetera, as Ms. Ward was mentioning, it is a time to reimagine and it is a time to realign. And so there's going to be just ongoing work that we need to take on, and we need to do it right, because this is uncharted territory, and so I think that, Ms. Ward had mentioned like King County again, and, their office up there is much larger, and they also have a very different structure. And so I think that at the very least, a council staff dedicated to handling all of this, because we're talking about all policy areas as well. It's a monumental task, and the least that we can do is have it, start with a dedicated staff person. So I definitely would support us doing that. Council President Katz.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm somebody that understands that we have said over and over again, especially during this budget, that we're sorry, but we can not afford things. But there's certain things that we can't afford not to do. And I think this is one of those topics. This is, if we do not get this right, especially in the very beginning of the process, which we're a little further ahead than the very beginning, but not enough. if we don't get it right in the very beginning, it's an extremely difficult topic in general. If we don't get it right now, we will never be able to get it corrected. And I believe it is necessary, as much as we all are very, very concerned about the money, and we should be, and we are. I think that it's only correct to have the additional position.
Thank you.
And on that note, I will work with Ms. Michelson to schedule it, and we will get it to the council as quickly as possible. It won't be tomorrow, but it'll be as quickly as possible. Thanks.
Thank you, Council President. So before we wrap up, there's a constituent of mine. I think he has also contacted some other folks who wanted me to flag that it would be great to have payroll file with racial data. And this is, again, another sort of policy piece, but it is true that as we have also worked on issues of pay equity, it would be great to see whether we can get that information and that data to also look into different important aspects of our workforce. So Ms. Ward, I don't know if perhaps with county stat or something, if we can look into that, if you can let us know, that'd be great.
Yeah, I had a conversation with Dave Grassman last week, and they do a data pool with all departments in July, and so he's committed to doing a data pool with the racial data from each department. Just one, to see if people are collecting that racial data, and if they are, then we'll pull that. So yes,
awesome.
You got that as well.
It's awesome. So I think what we'll do then as GO committee, I think we should try to at least have a check-in briefing every other month. Obviously, we're going to be, facing pretty soon council recess in August. But Ms. Ward, if you could give us perhaps a memo, just kind of describing how things are going, to keep us updated. And then when we come back in September, we can have another briefing. And then I guess same thing with the legislative branch, just to keep us all informed as to the progress of the items that we have discussed. And we will follow up also through Council President regarding this idea that Councilmember Albornoz described so well in terms of perhaps standing up a team similar to the work that we did collaboratively with the multicultural, multilingual communications team, as we are now entering this whole notion of reopening and recovery and all of that. So that lens is front and center. And Ms. Ward, you can get some additional assistance. So hopefully we can come up with an agreement on something like that, which I think would be really awesome. And then, as we said, also Council President Katz will then coordinate with Ms. Michelson to see what we can do to strengthen our capacity on the council to work on this. And lastly, I will say, because it is interesting, I got to sort of put my hat on as, legislator and county council member, et cetera. But following up on what Councilmember Albornoz said, I just want to echo my, deepest empathy and support to all of our employees, our Black employees, employees of color, but also our residents who didn't need a moment like this to deal with the emotional weight that being a person of color in this country carries. As someone who who's an immigrant and who has had to also understand exactly the framework under which we operate here, I can say that it is most certainly a daily reality, a daily emotional struggle in some ways. And so this moment, I think, has just pretty much put everything under a magnifying glass. But this is not new, or it's not unique, and it's not a trend. So I very much appreciate my colleagues' energy, interest, commitment, as well as the administration's commitment for us to do everything we can Nobody has done this in a perfect way, obviously, but we all at least can commit, and I know I do, to do this from the heart, and willing to obviously hear recommendations and get feedback. But I think this is an important moment, and I still am in awe of the fact that we were working towards this with such urgency last year, and thank God we did, because at least now we have that work out of the way, and now we can get into the implementation piece. So thank you all, and again, stay strong, stay healthy, and we will definitely reconvene. I don't have any other messages that people want to speak, so I appreciate everybody, and we will follow up on those items. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.